I held the will in both hands, the paper trembling between my fingers like it was alive, like it could feel the betrayal coursing through my veins. To my daughter Abigail, the lawyer read, voice low and uncertain. I leave nothing, as she has shown no interest in family. Nothing. That single word hit like a physical slap. For 23 years I had been Dad's caretaker, his nurse, his advocate, his shadow. Mason, my brother, floated in and out of Dad's life twice a year. Long enough for a few smiling photos and hollow promises. Yet somehow he'd managed to convince our dying father that I was the selfish one. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most, this story will feel familiar in the cruelest way. Because it's not just about losing money. It's about losing the truth itself. Let's go back. 3 years before everything started unraveling slowly, like a nightmare you can't wake up from. It began with a phone call. I was in Portland, halfway through a morning meeting, when Mom's voice broke through my ringtone, shaking. "Abby, it's your father," she said between sobs. He went out for groceries and couldn't find his way home. He'd driven that route for 30 years. I flew home 2 days later. The diagnosis arrived like a thunderclap. Early onset dementia, spreading through his mind faster than anyone expected. Mason, my polished older brother, didn't cry. He announced. Sitting neatly in our parents' living room, he wore his perfect Seattle confidence like armor. "I can't uproot my family," he said, calm and managerial. "The boys are settled. Grace has her schedule. And honestly, Abby," he looked at me with that thin, knowing smile, "you're single. Remote half the time. It just makes sense for you to handle this. It just makes sense." Like my life was a disposable bandage for his convenience. But I loved our father. Even after years of uneven affection, his constant praise for Mason's promotions, his lukewarm nods at my quiet achievements, I loved him. I wanted to believe that caring for him would be my final act of gratitude, so I packed up my life, ended my lease, and moved back home, to the same room whose wallpaper still showed the faint outlines of teenage posters. For 3 years, I became the heartbeat of his world. I memorized his medication schedule. 12 pills at precise times, color-coded on a worn-out chart taped to the fridge. I managed nurse visits, insurance chaos, endless paperwork. I coaxed him through nights when confusion devoured him whole, when he cried for Mom, gone 15 years now, and I held his hand until dawn, whispering that he was safe. Mason. He showed up at Christmas. On Dad's birthday. 2 glitter-dusted weekends a year. He'd pose for cheerful photos, upload them with captions like, "Family is everything," and then disappear back into his spotless Seattle life. And me? Exhausted. Unshowered. Half broke. But still going. Then Dad died. A quiet Tuesday morning, sunlight spilling through the curtains, his hand soft and still in mine. The funeral looked beautiful from the outside. Flowers everywhere, family friends filling the pews, but every condolence made my stomach twist. "You were truly a gift to him, Mason," people said as they clasped my brother's hand. "Such a loyal son." They barely glanced at me. Some even scowled, confused, as if I'd stumbled in by error. I told myself they simply didn't know. They must be mistaken. I was so innocent. Friday afternoon, 3 days after the funeral, I sat across from Dad's lawyer of nearly 30 years. Joe Patterson dodged my eyes, fingers tapping the desk like each beat was an apology. "Your father revised his estate several times over the last 2 years, he said cautiously. "The final change 6 months ago." He opened a file, cleared his throat, and began reading words that cut the air from the room. "To my son Mason Thompson, who has shown steadfast love and care during my illness, I leave my house at 247 Maple Street, Thompson & Sons Construction Company, and the rest of my estate, valued at roughly $800,000. The room spun. All I could hear was my pulse pounding in my ears. "To my daughter Abigail," he continued quietly, "I leave nothing. She has made it clear through her words and deeds that she has no interest in family, or in my well-being during my final years." I stopped listening after nothing. When Joe played a video file, I looked up, terrified and grasping for some shred of reality. There was Dad on the screen, gaunt, fragile, his eyes teary but resolute. His voice quivered through the speakers. "Abigail never calls unless she wants money. She never visits. I haven't seen her in over a year. She told Mason she doesn't want to deal with an old man's issues. I'm heartbroken, but I can't leave my assets to someone who views me as a burden." And just like that, The father I'd loved more fiercely than reason became a stranger reciting my brother's words. I staggered outside, made it halfway to my car, and vomited onto the asphalt. That night I didn't sleep. My mind replayed every word, every falsehood. He said he hadn't seen me in over a year, but I'd been living in that house. I'd been with him every day. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, a thought flickered, a desperate, irrational hope. Dad's computer was still in his study. Maybe it held something, some hint explaining how his reality had twisted so cruelly. The study was just as he'd left it. Papers stacked high, his favorite coffee mug still by the keyboard. Dust settling over the life he'd left behind bit by bit. I started his computer, scrolling through files, searching for something, anything that made sense. What I found was a monster bearing my brother's signature. There were emails, dozens of them supposedly from me. Whiny, ungrateful messages complaining about caring for Dad. I can't handle this anymore. He's getting worse and I have my own life. You find another way. Another. I'm too busy to visit this week or next. You'll manage. I stared at them, frozen. The tone wasn't mine. The grammar wasn't mine, but the sender field read, Abigail Thompson. When I checked the back-end data, my heart stopped. Every single message traced back to an IP address in Seattle, Mason's home network. He'd been impersonating me. More horrors unfolded. Screenshots of fake text threads, doctored messages supposedly between Dad and me, where I called him a burden, a chore. I sat paralyzed, devastated, the computer's glow casting the walls in ghostly accusations. The true betrayal sank in slowly. Dad's mind hadn't betrayed me first. Mason had. For 3 years, while I fed our father soup and read him novels, Mason fed him poison through fabricated evidence. And because dementia softens edges, Dad's mind clung to the lies long after it forgot the warmth of my touch or voice. Mason hadn't just manipulated him. He'd rewritten our bond in real time. Inside Dad's fading memory, I stayed up all night printing files, gathering every piece of digital proof. By dawn, the desk was buried under paper. Screenshots, metadata, timestamps, photos of me and Dad together at every event Mason skipped. Christmas mornings, doctor visits, summer barbecues, bank records proving I paid for Dad's groceries and medicine, undeniable evidence against every lie. But one final piece remained hidden. One Mason couldn't erase. 5 years earlier, after a break-in scare, Dad had installed security cameras throughout the house. Those cameras captured everything. Hours of footage showing me reading to him, aiding with physical therapy, sleeping on the couch beside his chair when he was frightened at night, and Mason's actual visits, brief, awkward 30-minute stops where he mostly rifled through Dad's papers and asked about important documents. I compiled a list of everyone at Dad's funeral. His doctor, neighbors, our extended family, Mason's co-workers who attended, Grace's parents who flew in from Denver, even Dad's physical therapist and the guy who delivered his groceries. I'd been collecting contact information for years, building a database for Dad's birthday cards and Christmas updates. Now it served a different purpose. The email subject line was stark. The truth about my father's final years. I wrote 3 pages laying out everything with surgical precision. The fake emails, the fabricated texts, the calculated manipulation of a man with dementia. I attached photo after photo of me caring for Dad, medical records, financial statements, security footage, and ended with this. Mason Thompson spent 3 years systematically lying to our dying father, convincing him his devoted daughter had abandoned him. While I lived in Dad's house as his full-time caregiver, Mason was in Seattle forging communications to secure the entire inheritance. He didn't just steal my inheritance. He stole my father's love in his final years. He ensured Dad died believing his daughter didn't care. I wanted you all to know the truth about the devoted son you praised at Dad's funeral. I sent it to 87 people at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday. 6 a.m. my phone began to ring. Aunt Judy called first, weeping. Abigail, sweetheart, we had no clue. We thought God, what he did to you, what he did to your father. Dad's neighbor, Mrs. Ann, called next. Always wondered why your father seemed so down when you were right there caring for him so well. Now I see that brother of yours should be ashamed. Then came the call that made it all worthwhile. Grace's mother, Luke's wife of 32 years, had read my email and immediately called Grace's father, who then called Mason at his Seattle office and yelled for 20 minutes about what kind of monster manipulates a dying man with dementia. Grace's whole family had been at the funeral. They'd heard Mason's eulogy about being a devoted son. They'd seen his tears at the graveside. And now they knew it was all an act. Within 6 hours, Mason had lost more than money. His wife's family, people who'd welcomed him, trusted him with their daughter, boasted about their son-in-law's character, now saw him for what he truly was. His mother-in-law called him a sociopathic predator. His father-in-law threatened to fly to Seattle for a talk about honor. Grace called me that night sobbing, "I don't know who the father of my children is. How could he do this to you? How could he do this to your dad?" Mason tried calling me once. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail I deleted without hearing. His reputation was ruined. The story spread through our hometown like wildfire. Dad's doctor was so appalled he reported Mason to the State Bar Association. Apparently, deceiving to interfere with an elderly person's medical care is a serious crime. Mason's company got several calls from people who'd received my email. Professional fallout for personal actions. His coworkers now knew exactly who they'd been working with. But the sweetest justice was watching his perfect life collapse. Grace filed for separation 2 weeks later. She couldn't face him knowing what he'd done to a helpless old man with dementia. Her parents banned him from their home. Even his own sons began asking tough questions about why Grandpa died, thinking Aunt Abigail didn't love him. I didn't get Dad's house. I didn't get the business or the $800,000. But I gained something far more precious. Everyone knew the truth. The whole town knew who truly loved Dad, who gave everything to care for him, who held his hand through dark nights and celebrated his small wins during tough days. And everyone knew what Mason really was. A predator who manipulated a dying man's failing mind to steal an inheritance he never earned. I sleep soundly now. Dad died believing I'd abandoned him, and I can never undo that. But I made sure the world knows the truth about his precious son. Sometimes the best revenge isn't reclaiming what was taken. It's ensuring everyone knows who the real villain was. If this story struck a chord with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice served cold. Because sometimes the truth is the most powerful weapon of all.